Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I noticed from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shulman and Mr. Worthing were dining here, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir, 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wines. I've often found in married households the champagne is rarely a first-rate brand.
Good heavens. Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself up to the present. I've only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't think I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That would do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really? If the lower orders can't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing.
Hello, dear Earnest. What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I do believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your part of the country, is it not?
Eh? Shropshire? Oh, yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups and why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Oh, dearly Aunt Augusta. And Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Very nice, I'm sure. But I don't think Aunt Augusta would quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I've come to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
There is nothing romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love. However, there is nothing romantic in a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. And then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is the uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that. The divorce court was especially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no speculating on that subject. The divorce courts are made in heaven. Please stay away from the cucumber sandwiches. I ordered them specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all this time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Here, the bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is, too.
My dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You behave as if you were already married to her. You are not already married to her, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth would you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls don't marry men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? Why, what on earth do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes,
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I was writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward. no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that's very mean of you, Ernest, I must say. But it makes no matter now. For now that you look at the inscription on the inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to do, to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't read. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one talks about in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name?
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is, too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Now just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with our fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. Surely that is a matter that an aunt should be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt, and that is absurd. Now produce my cigarette case.
But why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily, with our fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I must admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? You might make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most Ernest-looking person I've ever seen in my entire life. It is perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany. I shall keep this as proof in case you ever attempt to deny your name isn't Ernest to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, it is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
But that does not account for the fact that your small aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her uncle. Come, old boy, you had better much have the thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It's very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on, tell me the whole thing. I must admit, I have always secretly suspected you of being a bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by bunburyist?
I shall reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle for motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country, under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected so. I have bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Dear Algy, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. Because a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce much for one's health or one's happiness. In order to get up to town whenever I like, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest. who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either in modern literature complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't do it. You should leave that to the people who have been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. But you are as a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you are a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented a perfectly invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week now.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are perfectly careless about sending out invitations. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You'd much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the slightest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family and sat down with either no woman at all or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across from the dinner table. It is not very pleasant, indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is on the increase. The number of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is merely washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. In fact, if Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore, so I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I strongly advise you to do the same with with your invalid friend with the absurdity.
Nothing would induce me to part with Bunbury. And if ever you get married, which seems to me to be extremely problematic, you would be happy to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry Gwendolen, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. What you don't seem to understand is that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved it half the time.
For heaven's sake, Algy, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
No, it's not easy to be anything nowadays. There's lots of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only creditors and relatives ever ring in such a Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get out of the way, in order that you might have the opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but do be serious about it. I hate people who aren't serious about meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Dear Algernon, I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would mean that we could develop, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Carberry. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolen, hold you come and sit here?
Thank you, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
I am grateful, Buster, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause, I, of course, could not say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. Such a nice woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It will put my table completely out. Your uncle will have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is stricken ill again. I seem to think I should be with him.
It's very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, yes. Poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
I must say, Algernon, I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. Shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your uncle, but he never seems to pay much attention as far as any improvement in his ailments goes. I should be much obliged, Algernon, if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I shall speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. And I think I can promise you that he'll be all right by Saturday. Older music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. If one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll go over the program I've drawn out for you. If you kindly come into the next room with me for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few explications. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me?
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any other girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, that you're more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I'm told. My ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment that Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling! You don't know how happy you have made me.
Oh, Ernest, my own Ernest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it. Supposing it was something else. You don't mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, to speak quite candidly, darling, I don't much care for the name of Earnest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has a music all of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say that I think there are other, much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? Oh, no, there is very little music in the name Jack, agreeable indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity of John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John, for she would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must be married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married? Mr. Worthing.
Well, surely, Miss Fairfax, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe that you were not absolutely indifferent towards me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject hasn't even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it's an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I want to let you know quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I'm afraid that you've had a very little experience in how to propose.
My own one, you are the only girl in my life that I have ever loved.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope you always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this silly recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I'm expecting to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing hasn't quite finished yet.
Finish what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise. Pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be, it is hardly a matter she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
The carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not on my list of eligible young men. Though I keep the same list the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite prepared to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I do smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29?
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres. Though I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only ones who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point will be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I have a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Blossom. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like. It's 6 months' notice.
Lady Blossom. I don't know her.
Well, she gets about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149?
Ah, the unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Well, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
They count as Tories. They dine with us, or come in the evening at any rate. And now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born into what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents when it would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. Well, I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, a very kind and charitable gentleman, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman with the first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
a handbag.
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag. Somewhat large, black leather handbag with handles on it. It was an ordinary handbag, in fact.
And in what locality did this Mr. James Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, the cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal some social indiscretion, has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
May I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly tell you that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. Though I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would allow our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Good day. Oh, for heaven's sake, Algie, don't play that ghastly tune. How idiotic you are.
Didn't it go off all right, though, boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know just the way she has. She was always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Well, Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we're engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I've never met such a gorgon. I don't know exactly what a gorgon is like, but I'm perfectly sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In either case, she's a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I'm sorry, Algie, I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in this way before you.
My dear fellow, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are merely a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge of how to live, or the slightest instinct about when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't suppose there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming exactly like a mother in about 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That is his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. It's become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
Well, I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, have you told Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't the sort of thing one tells a sweet, refined girl like Gwendolyn. What silly ideas you have about how to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and someone else if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, by the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, yes. It's a hereditary sort of thing, my dear fellow. It's a thing that runs in families. You had better much say a severe chill.
And you're certain a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything like that?
Of course it isn't.
Very well, then. My poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him?
But you had just said that Miss Cardew is a little too much interested in your poor brother Earnest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
That is all right. Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays absolutely no attention at all to her lessons.
I should rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18.
Does Gwendolyn know that you have an excessively pretty ward who is just only 18?
One doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Gwendolyn and Cecily are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I will bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they have called each other a lot of other things. Now, if we're going to get a good table at Willis's, we'd better go and dress. You know, it's nearly 7.
Oh, it's always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to the theater?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Perhaps go to the club?
Oh, no, I hate talking.
Trot around the Empire by 10?
No, I hate looking at things. It's so silly.
Then what shall we do?
Nothing?
It is very hard work doing nothing. Although I don't mind very hard work when there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word!
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Gwendolyn, I don't think I quite approve of this.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough for that.
Gwendolyn.
Lord, we will never be married. From the look on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children have to say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whichever influence I ever had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and very often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Darling.
The story of your romantic origins, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name offers an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There's good postal service, I suppose? May be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
I own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round.
Thank you. I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
I'm going lumbering tomorrow, Lane.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can lay out all my dressing clothes, the smoking jackets, and all the lumbering suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow shall be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are the perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction.
Now there's a sweet, sensible, intellectual girl, the only girl I have ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about Bunbury, that's all.
If you're not careful, your friend Bunbury's going to get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only thing in life that isn't very serious.
Oh, that is nonsense. You never talk of anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Oh, pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Oh, child. You know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German when he was leaving for town yesterday. But he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious I think he cannot be quite well.
Oh, your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. Oh, I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Oh, Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You know how he has to deal with that awful brother of his.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that awful brother of his to come down here sometime. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
Oh, I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a man that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. No, I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. Oh, child, you must put away your diary. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter all the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all of the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Oh, did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I do not like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Oh, not? No. No, the manuscript unfortunately was abandoned. Well, I use that word in the sense of lost or mislaid. Oh, to your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
Oh, but I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, oh, this is indeed a surprise.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I had to trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to shake a short stroll in the park with you, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I've not mentioned anything about a headache.
Yes, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you're not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her ribs. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from the deeds. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
No, no, we don't expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely, drawn from the Bacon office. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
Dr. Chasuble, I think I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
Oh, that would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Oh, even these metallic problems have their melodramatic sides.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany West, Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. And I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he's very anxious to speak with you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here, please. Oh, I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, from your card, I see, are my Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin, Ernest.
Oh, I am not wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you certainly have been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and really being good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Well, I have been rather reckless.
I am glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't see how you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I am obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
Oh, no, the appointment is in London.
Oh. Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I still think you had better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak with you about your immigrating.
About my what?
About your immigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly would not let Jack buy my outfits. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you'll be requiring neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly promising. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you like, Cousin Cecily.
Well, I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
Well, it is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should remember that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have an appetite without a buttonhole first.
A modest Miel?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I've ever seen in my life.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare, in which every sensible man should like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I should care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear doctor. You should get married. Oh, misanthrope, I can understand. Womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
Well, that is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often, I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. Where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing.
Oh, this is indeed a surprise. We did not expect you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother!
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead!
Your brother Ernest, dead.
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing you are always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but this is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prison, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. And will the interment take place here?
No, he seemed to express a desire to be buried abroad in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly ever points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction this Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the upper orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
You mentioned christenings, dear doctor. I suppose you know how to christen all right. I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
Oh, it is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. Well, I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But Mr. Worthing, is there any particular intern in whom you are interested? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
Well, people who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it's not for any child, dear doctor, though I'm quite fond of children. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly economical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is always necessary, or indeed, I think, advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Well, I might trot around about 5, if that would suit you.
Perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Don't think it would be much fun to be christened alongside other babies. That would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Oh, Jack, I am so pleased to see you back, but what horrid clothes you put on. Do you go and change them?
Dear child,
It's all right, it's all
What's
right.
the matter, Uncle Jack?
I have
You
some
look as
news.
if you had a toothache, and I have got such a surprise for you.
First,
Who do you
I
think
must-
is in the dining room? Your brother! Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
Cecily, I haven't got a brother.
You mustn't say that, Uncle Jack.
But
However poorly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother.
technically,
You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him, could you? I will tell him to come here, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
well,
these are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
I don't know at all what
John, I have come down from town to tell you that I'm very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing would induce me to take his hand. I think his coming here utterly disgraceful, and he knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me all about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury. He goes to visit so often, and surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
He's been telling you about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Well, I won't have him telling you about Bunbury or anything else. I think his coming here enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Oh, I must admit the faults are all on my side, but I must say that Brother John's coldness is peculiarly painful. I was expecting a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering this is the first time I have ever come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Then this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgment.
I feel very happy.
Oh, you young scoundrel, Algy! You've got to get out of here at once. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I unpacked it, put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Oh, yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to speak of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
But I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for someone who is actually staying with you in your house. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a week as a guest or as anything else. You have got to leave, and by the 4-5 train.
Well, I certainly won't leave you so long as you're in mourning. I would think it very unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I would think it most unkind if you didn't.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I've never seen someone take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, that is better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I always make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage. Your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4-5, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. but I must see you again before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. There she is.
I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone and ordered the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
And we've got to part.
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has only known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
Oh,
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
it can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute affection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
No. You see, it is very simply the record of a young girl's thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I do hope you will order a copy. But pray, don't stop, Ernest. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on now. I'm quite ready for more. Don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, from the moment I looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
No, I don't think you should say that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily?
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week? At the same hour?
Sir.
Uncle Jack would be very upset if he knew we were staying on till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you. Love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, of course, you silly boy. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say, it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to settle the matter one way or another, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you here, under this dear old tree. The next day, I went out and bought this little ring in your name. And here is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes. You've got wonderful taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. And here, in this box, are where I keep all of your dear letters.
My letters? My own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
Well, you need hardly remind me of that,
I remember only too well I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me breathe then, Cecily.
Oh, no, we couldn't. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I broke off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was, on the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would have hardly been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
You are a perfect angel, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Yes. With a little help from others.
I am so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think I could break it off now that I have actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes. Of course.
Oh, you mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love a man by the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But do you mean to say you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
But what other name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon!
My own dear, sweet, loving little darling. I don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon.
Oh.
It isn't a bad name at all. In fact, it's a rather aristocratic name. More than half the chaps that get into the bankruptcy courts are called Algernon. Seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, wouldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear I should never be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the rites and ceremonies of the church?
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see one of the most important christening. I mean, well, the most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be gone longer than half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since the 14th of February, and I only just met you today, I think it rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I shall be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on a very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Is it Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come here, please.
Yes.
And you can bring tea. Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London. I do not quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of him.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, allow me to introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew. Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong. How kind of you to like me so much after we have known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down, please. And we call you Cecily, may I not? With pleasure. And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you? If you wish. Then that is all quite settled, is it not? I hope so. Perhaps this is a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Father, I suppose? I don't think so. Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. Certainly, once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. System. So do you mind if I looking at you with my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no. I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also.
No. I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes. I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. That is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. Cecily, I am very fond of you. I have liked you ever since I met you, but I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I can't help but expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Oh, pray do. I think that whenever anyone has something unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. Even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less ancient history provides us with many of those painful examples from which I refer to. Indeed, if it were not so, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon. Gwendolyn, did you say Ernest?
Yes?
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for some time.
Ah, that accounts for it. Now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load off of my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had ever come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you're quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing that is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
But Gwendolyn, I see no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily. I'm afraid there is some slight error. For you see, Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to be married to me. The news will appear in the Morning Post by Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be
under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago. Well, that certainly is very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. He couldn't care to verify this and didn't pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim. It would distress me more than I can say, dear Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind. The poor boy has been entrapped by a foolish promise. I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand. Whatever entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married. Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion such as this, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure. Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade. I am glad to say I have never seen a spade. It is quite clear our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here, as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual. Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew? Yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties. 5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds. I suppose that is why you live in town. Quite a well-kept garden, this is, Miss Cardew. So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax. I had no idea that there were any flowers in the country. Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London. Personally, I can't understand how anybody manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does, the country always bores me to death. This is what the newspapers are calling agricultural depression, is it not? I hear the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax? Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea. Sugar? No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore. Cake or bread and butter? Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays. And that to Miss Fairfax. You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar. And though I ask most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far. To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go. From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I thought you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right. Well, it seems to me that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar nature to make in the neighborhood.
Gwendolyn!
A moment. May I ask if you're engaged to this young lady.
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may. I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax, for the gentleman whose arm is at present around your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing. I beg your pardon? This is Uncle Jack. Jack? Oh! Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, what? I mean, yes, to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may. I felt that there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. For you see, the man who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief. Algernon Moncrief? Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh. Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name really is John. It's been John for years.
It seems a gross deception has been practiced on both of us. My poor wounded Cecily, my sweet rocket Gwendolyn. You will call me sister, will you not? There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian. An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn. Cecily. It is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. Indeed, it is the first time in my life that I have ever been reduced to such a painful position. I'm really quite inexperienced in what to do. However, I can tell you both quite candidly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother in my life, and I certainly don't intend to ever have a brother in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never, not even of any kind.
I am afraid that it is quite clear that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone. It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it? Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there. Certainly, men are such cowards.
This ghastly state of things is what you call bun-burying, I suppose.
Yes, and the most wonderful bumbery it is. It is the most wonderful bumbery I've ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to bun-bury here.
Oh, that is absurd. One has a right to bumbery wherever one chooses. Every serious bumberyist knows that.
Serious bun-buryist? Good heavens.
One must be serious about something if one wants any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about bumbering. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't the slightest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have the most absolute trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to get down to the country quite so often as you're used to, dear Algy, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
And as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense for your deceiving a clever, brilliant, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wished to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
I wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I think there's no likelihood of you and Miss Fairfax ever becoming united.
Well! That is no business can sit there calmly eating muffins while we're in this horrible trouble I can't make out? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter might get on my gloves. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am unhappy, therefore I'm eating muffins. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason for you to eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would have tea cake, Jack. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may be allowed to eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
Quite so. The muffins are the same.
Algernon, I wish to goodness you would go.
You couldn't possibly ask me to go without having dinner. It's absurd. I never go without having dinner. Nobody ever does. Except people like vegetarians and that sort. Besides, I have just made arrangements for Dr. Charleston to be christened at 6:15 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you forget that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30. And I, naturally, will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence to suggest that I have ever been christened before at all. I think it extremely probable I never was. And so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes. But I haven't been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
That may be, so I know my constitution can stand it. I must say, if you're not sure about ever having been christened, it may be dangerous you're venturing on it now. It may make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected to you was nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
But you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
I know, it used to be, I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
That is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you're at the muffins again. I told you I was particularly fond of them. There's only one left.
But I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? Oh, the ideas you have of hospitality.
Algernon, I want you to go. I do not want you here. Why won't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. There is still one muffin left.
The fact that they did not follow us into the house at once, as anyone else would have done, seems to show that they have some sense of shame left. They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance. Oh, they don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't a cough.
They're looking at us. What a effrontery. They're approaching. How forward of them. Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly, it's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence has produced a most unpleasant effect.
answer, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. And it does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True, in matters of great importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation do you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have more of an opportunity of coming up into town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the moment for German skepticism. That explanation seemed to be in order, especially Mr. Worthing. His seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief has said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
So do you think that we should forgive him?
Yes.
I mean, no. True. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should be the one to tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we're going to be christened this afternoon.
For me, you're prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
Oh, how absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens!
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Sit down. Sit down at once. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by luggage train. Her unhappy father, I am glad to say, is under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question I would consider it wrong. But you, of course, will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
May I ask if it is in this house that your intimate friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Oh, dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of some revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
Dear Aunt Augusta, what I mean is that Bunbury was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live, so Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physician. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at last to some definite course of action, and acted under proper And now that we have finally got rid of Mr. Bunbury, may I ask you, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me to be a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there is something peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me to be rather above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desired information until yesterday. I had no idea there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest, Gervase Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, North Britain.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. Three addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open for your inspection.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Mercers Markby, Markby, and Markby.
Markby, Markby, and Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and English varieties.
A life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So nice to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to be a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. So few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities. Any of the qualities that last and prove with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair almost as if nature might have left it. We could soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous effect in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and in 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. Ah, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The two weak points of our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. Chin a little higher here. Style largely depends upon the way the chin is worn. They're wound very high just at present. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
there are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the dearest, sweetest, prettiest girl in the whole world. And I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. My dear, you know, of course, that Algernon has nothing but his debt to depend upon. I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak correctly, I do not approve of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of learning each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
Pardon me, but this marriage is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing but looks, everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me, Lady Bracknell, to have to speak to you so candidly about your nephew, but the fact is, I don't approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon, impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I'm afraid there can be no doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house under the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I have just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89, a wine I was specially saving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affection of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the start that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I certainly don't intend to ever have a brother, not even of any kind.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, remains unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Cecily, come over here. How old are you, child?
Well, I am really only just 18, but I always admit to being 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are quite right to make some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be entirely accurate about her age, so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 and evening parties. Well, it will not be so very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So, I do not think that your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray, forgive me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but I feel bound to tell you that, according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age till she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth, who of their own free choice have remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbledon is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even more attractive at the age you mentioned that she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algy, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. I am not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others.
and waiting. Even to be married is quite out of the question.
And what is to be done?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg you, of you, to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment that you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
Surely you must understand that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, may choose for himself. Come, dear. We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might invite comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. We'll not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased to learn that this was the way in which you are wasting your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I do not think that, as things are now, Dr. Chasuble, it would be of much practical value to either of us.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the new opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I'm on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for one moment. This matter may prove to be of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultured of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
Is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism, where is that baby?
28 years ago, Prism. You left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained an infant of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later... Through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered standing by itself at midnight in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality, but the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I never can forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet, and I placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Oh, do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria! The Brighton Line!
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
If you're not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Charlesworth. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Guardian is a very emotional nature.
All this noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if you were having an argument. It's like arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It is stopped now.
I wish he would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends upon your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes. Here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Ah, and here is the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. A tear on the lock are my initials. Oh, I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. All the bag is undoubtedly mine, but I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes! Mother!
Mr. Worthing! I am unmarried.
Unmarried? Well, I do not deny that is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthing! There is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but could you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid the news I have to give you may not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother! Then I have a brother after all! I always knew I had a brother! I always said I had a brother! Cecily! How could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble! My unfortunate brother! Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother! Gwendolyn! My unfortunate brother! Algy, you young scoundrel, you! You're going to have to start treating me with more respect from now on. You have never treated me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not today, old boy, I must admit. I did my best, however. It was a little out of practice.
My own one? But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
Good heavens, I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affection. Oh, what a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then the matter had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That's settled. Now then, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
As the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes. And what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall the general's Christian name. Though I've no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years. And that was the result of the Indian climate and marriage, and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy! Can't you recall what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear on the army lists of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. However, I'm sure his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Now then, let's see. M generals. Ah, here we go. Malum, Maximum, Magley. What ghastly names these people have. Markby, Migsby, Moggs, Moncrief, Lieutenant, 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General, 1869, Christian names. Earnest, John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, that my name was Earnest. Well, it is Earnest after all. I mean, it naturally is Earnest.
Yes, I remember the general was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Oh, Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you ever forgive me?
I can, for I feel you're sure to change.
My own one, Letitia.
Frederick, at last.
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized, for the first time in my life, the vital importance of being earnest.